When I got the call from the hospital, I dropped everything. My daughter was dying, and her husband was nowhere to be found. I learned the truth that night. The phone rang just as I was turning off the living room light. At first, I thought I imagined it, that faint metallic sound slicing through the silence of my small house. But it came again, sharper this time. I reached for it with trembling hands, not yet knowing that from this call onward, my life would never be the same. "Mr. Whitmore?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is St. Mary's Hospital. Your daughter, Lily Whitmore Reed, was brought in about 20 minutes ago. She's in critical condition. You should come immediately." For a moment I couldn't answer. My throat closed, my vision blurred, and I heard my own pulse pounding in my ears. Critical condition. The words hung in the air like smoke. My daughter had texted me barely an hour earlier. "Love you, Dad. Ethan's taking me out for dinner. Don't stay up too late." Now she was fighting for her life. I didn't even grab a coat. The November air hit me like ice as I ran to the car, keys clattering in my hand. Streetlights smeared across the windshield while the wipers fought the drizzle. I barely noticed the red lights, the honking horns. My thoughts raced faster than the tires. What happened? An accident? Something sudden? And where was Ethan? By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot, my knuckles were white from gripping the wheel. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed over sterile walls, and the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. A nurse spotted me at the reception. "You're Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes. My daughter. Follow me, please." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were already saying what her mouth couldn't. Down the long corridor, machines beeped behind closed doors, and muffled voices drifted through the halls. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she opened the door to room 214, I stopped breathing. Lily lay there, pale, fragile, her chest rising with the rhythm of a ventilator. Tubes, wires, blinking monitors. My little girl, who once ran barefoot through our backyard, laughing with sunlight in her hair, now lay silent beneath cold white sheets. "Dad," the word escaped her lips like a sigh. "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered, taking her cold hand between mine. "You're gonna be okay. I'm right here." She tried to smile, but winced instead. A tear slid from her temple into her hairline. "Hurts," she murmured. I brushed her forehead with my palm. "Don't talk, Lily. Just rest." When the nurse stepped out, I pulled out my phone and dialed Ethan's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, Rich," he shouted over loud music and laughter. "What's up, man? Where are you?" I demanded. "At home. Well, kinda. Out with friends. It's my birthday, remember?" He chuckled. "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Lily's in the hospital. Critical condition. You need to come now." The line went silent for a second. Then he sighed. "Man, you serious? Tonight's been planned for weeks. She'll be fine, right? I'll come later." My grip tightened on the phone. Later? She might not have a later. But I only heard laughter in the background, someone shouting, "Happy birthday, Ethan," before the line went dead. I stared at the screen in disbelief. For a moment, the whole room seemed to tilt. I wanted to throw the phone, to scream until the walls cracked. But Lily stirred, and I forced myself to breathe. She needed calm, not rage. Hours crawled by. I sat beside her bed, talking softly. Anything to keep her anchored to this world. I told her stories about her childhood, how she used to beg for pancakes on Sundays, how she once painted the neighbor's dog blue because she thought he looked sad. Each memory was a fragile thread pulling her back to me. Around midnight, a doctor entered, a tall, tired-looking man with gray around his temples. "Mr. Whitmore," he said quietly, "we've stabilized her for now, but it's very serious. If there's family who wants to see her, this would be the time." I nodded, unable to speak. When he left, I looked at Lily again. Her eyes fluttered open, weak but aware. She reached for me. "Dad, promise me something," she whispered. "Anything, sweetheart. If I don't make it, don't let him pretend. Don't let Ethan tell people he loved me. He didn't. You know that, right?" Her voice broke, and tears filled her eyes. I wanted to deny it, to protect her from that truth, but the silence between us said enough. "I promise," I said. Her hand loosened in mine as she drifted back into unconsciousness. I sat there, staring at the machines, at the fragile rise and fall of her chest. Outside, rain hammered against the window like impatient fingers. Minutes stretched into hours. The hospital grew quiet, the kind of silence that feels alive, full of waiting. I leaned back, exhaustion washing over me, when suddenly the hallway filled with the faint sound of a phone ringing again. A nurse rushed past, her face pale. Then a doctor followed, faster this time. And in that instant, before anyone spoke a word, I knew. Something inside me broke. Not loud, not dramatic, just a silent crack that would never quite heal. An hour later, everything would change. But at that moment, all I could do was hold her hand and whisper, "I'm here, Lily. I'm not leaving." When dawn crept through the hospital blinds, I realized I hadn't slept for even a minute. The night had dissolved into a blur of monitors, whispers, and the sound of Lily's uneven breathing. The nurse brought me a cup of coffee that had long gone cold before I noticed it sitting there. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, time had stopped. A doctor entered quietly, his face too calm, too rehearsed. "Mr. Whitmore," he began, "we're doing everything we can, but her organs are starting to shut down. She's fighting, but it doesn't look good." I stared at him, unable to speak. My mind refused to process the words. She was 29. She loved painting, humming along to Sinatra, overcooking pasta, and calling me every Sunday just to talk. She couldn't just stop existing. "Can I see her?" I managed to whisper. He nodded, and I stepped closer to the bed. Lily looked even smaller now, swallowed by the sterile whiteness around her. Her skin was almost translucent, her breathing shallow. I squeezed her hand, begging silently for her to open her eyes again. That's when I heard laughter. It came from my phone, a notification ping from social media. Without thinking, I opened it. Ethan had posted a video, him and his friends at a restaurant, cake lit with candles, champagne flowing. The caption read, "Best birthday ever, surrounded by real love." My chest tightened. Real love, I muttered, trembling with anger. My daughter was dying in this very moment while he celebrated himself. I showed the video to the nurse by instinct, as if needing confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. She looked horrified but said nothing. I stood up so fast that the chair fell backward. "I need to step outside," I said, though I wasn't sure where my legs would take me. In the hallway, I called him again. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. My fingers gripped the phone so hard it almost cracked. "Coward," I whispered under my breath. "You selfish, heartless coward." Minutes later, the doctor appeared again. One look at his face, and I felt my world tilt. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry." The hallway blurred. The walls moved farther away. A long, distant ringing filled my ears, drowning out everything else. I stumbled back into Lily's room. The monitor's steady beeping had turned into a single, unbroken tone. Nurses rushed in, but I knew it was over. My knees gave out beside the bed. I held her hand. The same hand I held when she learned to walk, when she got her first job, when she told me she was getting married. Now it was still, her warmth fading with each passing second. "Lily," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I promised you I'd be here. I kept my word." Tears blurred my vision as I pressed my forehead to her palm. The room filled with the soft hum of machines shutting down. Afterward, everything happened too fast. Papers to sign, personal items in a plastic bag, her wedding ring inside a small envelope. I walked out of the hospital carrying what was left of my daughter. Not her laughter, not her warmth, just silence and cold metal. Outside, the morning sun was blinding. Cars passed, people chatted, birds sang. The world had the audacity to keep going. And Ethan? He finally texted me. "Heard about Lily. Damn, that's rough. I'll come later once I'm sober." No apology. No remorse. Just that. I stood there on the sidewalk, reading his words over and over, until my hands began to shake uncontrollably. That's when the promise I made to Lily replayed in my mind. Don't let him pretend. I knew what I had to do. That day, I buried my grief beneath something colder, something sharper. I went home, sat in front of my daughter's photo, and whispered, "Rest easy, sweetheart. Your father's not done yet." The silence of the house felt different then, not empty, but waiting. Because this was no longer just sorrow. It was the beginning of retribution. The day after Lily's death passed in fragments I barely remember. Phone calls, condolences, signatures, and the sterile sound of people trying to be kind when no words could ever help. I moved through it like a ghost, polite, numb, nodding at faces I didn't recognize. But beneath that fog, something darker began to stir. Ethan didn't show up at the hospital. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. Not even for the paperwork. The nurses kept asking if he was coming to collect her belongings, but he didn't. He never came. By evening, I sat in my car outside their house, the house my Lily had turned into a home. I still had the spare key she gave me, though Ethan once told me, half joking, "We don't really need you dropping by unannounced, do we?" That sentence echoed now like an insult carved in stone. I stepped out, the air heavy with the smell of wet leaves. Through the front window, lights spilled onto the driveway. Laughter again. Music. He was hosting people. The day after his wife's death. I walked closer and saw them. Ethan and a few friends drinking, talking, the television on. My heart twisted into something unrecognizable. I rang the bell. He froze when he saw me. His eyes widened, and for a second, guilt flickered, then vanished. "Richard," he said flatly, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. "This isn't a good time." "Not a good time?" My voice trembled. "My daughter just died." He looked away, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. I know. It's been hard for me too. I just need people around right now." "People," I repeated. "You needed her. She was dying, Ethan, and you were cutting cake." His expression hardened. "Don't start this. She was sick for months, you know that. There was nothing anyone could do." The way he said nothing made my blood boil. "So that's it. You move on? Pretend like she was just another chapter?" He sighed, irritated. "You wouldn't understand, Richard. Grief looks different for everyone." Then he turned his back and walked inside, shutting the door in my face. Something inside me snapped. I stood there on the porch, staring at the reflection of my own hollow eyes in the glass. For the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than sadness, the need for truth. Not revenge, not yet. Truth first. Over the next days, I started to dig. I spoke with Lily's friends, co-workers, even her doctor. Slowly, a picture began to form, one uglier than I could have imagined. Lily had been in and out of the hospital for weeks. Stress-related heart complications, anxiety attacks. Her doctor said she'd come alone most of the time, even when she could barely walk. Her husband was always busy, the nurse told me quietly. She'd smile and say, "He'll come later." But he never did. At home, I found her old laptop. It took me hours to guess the password, Sunflower 91. That was what she called herself when she was little. Inside her emails, I found messages she'd sent but never delivered. Letters to Ethan, written in heartbreak. "You say you love me, but you disappear when I need you most. Sometimes I wish Dad lived closer. At least he'd notice when I cry. If something ever happens to me, I hope you remember the promises you made. Because I never will." By the time I finished reading, the house was silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. I sat in her chair, surrounded by the faint smell of her perfume, feeling like the walls were closing in. Then I noticed something, a folder on her desktop named Insurance. Inside was a document signed just 2 months earlier. A life insurance policy. Beneficiary, Ethan Reed. My heart sank. The amount was enormous, more money than Lily ever earned in her entire life. Pieces of the puzzle began to align in my head. His sudden charm before her illness. The expensive watch he wore now. The parties, the confidence. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. The anger was no longer loud. It became something quieter, colder, the kind that didn't burn, but froze everything it touched. I knew what Lily had asked of me, don't let him pretend. And now, I had the first clue that pretending was exactly what he'd been doing all along. That night, I took her laptop, her phone, and the insurance document. I placed them in a box and hid it in my trunk. The next time I saw Ethan, I wouldn't come as a grieving father. I'd come as a man who knew the truth. The funeral was held 3 days later. Cold rain fell in a steady rhythm, tapping against umbrellas and black coats. The cemetery smelled of wet grass and sorrow. I stood beside Lily's casket, my fingers gripping the wooden edge until they hurt. Her favorite lilies, white ones, were laid across the top. The pastor's voice faded into the wind. Ethan arrived late. Not just minutes, nearly an hour after the service had started. He walked toward the crowd, sunglasses on despite the dark clouds, his expression practiced. People turned to look, whispering quietly. He didn't notice, or didn't care. When he finally reached me, he placed a hand on my shoulder like a man doing what's expected of him. "She was special," he said flatly. "She'll be missed." I turned to him slowly. His suit was pressed, his hair styled, his breath heavy with cologne and faint alcohol. My daughter's ring hung from his neck on a thin chain. She already is missed, I replied, by those who actually loved her. He forced a small smile, the kind you wear in front of cameras. I didn't react. I just watched. Watched how he adjusted his tie, how he checked his phone between the prayers, how he stepped aside when it was time to lower her down. After the service, people came to me with condolences, neighbors, friends, even strangers. Ethan vanished halfway through. One of Lily's co-workers whispered that she'd seen him getting into a car with a woman wearing red heels. I said nothing. Not yet. That evening, I drove back to their house. The porch light was on. The same warm glow Lily used to say made the house feel alive. Now it felt like a lie. Through the window, I saw him sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on his phone, music playing softly. Empty wine glasses stood beside a half-eaten steak. I knocked on the door once. He looked up, startled. Then he smirked. Richard, didn't expect company. I won't stay long, I said. We need to talk. He shrugged, stepping aside. Sure, come in. Inside, nothing had changed. Lily's paintings still hung on the walls, her slippers still by the door. But something in the air was wrong, like the house itself knew it was missing its soul. I sat down. You didn't even stay for the burial, I said quietly. He poured himself another drink. I can't handle funerals. They mess me up. I'm grieving in my own way. I studied his face. His grief looked a lot like arrogance. You know, I said, Lily used to tell me she wanted to move closer to me. Said she felt lonely here. He laughed. She was emotional. You know how she was. She was sick, I corrected him, and scared. But you were too busy celebrating real love, weren't you? That wiped the smile off his face. You've been checking my social media? I've been burying my daughter. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, turning away. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not guilt, but unease. Before leaving, I looked around the room one last time. On the shelf stood a framed photo of them on their wedding day. She was glowing. He looked proud, possessive. The frame was cracked in the corner, though, a small fracture. I stared at it for a long time before saying, she deserved better than you. As I stepped outside, he muttered, Old man, you're looking for someone to blame. Don't make it me. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. That night, I sat alone in my house with the box of evidence, Lily's laptop, the insurance file, the printed screenshots of his party photos. I laid them out carefully on the table like puzzle pieces. The truth was ugly, but clear. He hadn't just neglected her. He'd planned for her to die. Maybe not directly, but with the kind of cold indifference that made him believe he'd get away with everything. I wasn't a man of violence. I'd never been. But there are other kinds of justice, quiet ones, patient ones. I made a list. Names of people to contact, things to check, steps to take. Lily's insurance agent, her employer, the lawyer who handled their finances, the woman in red heels. If Ethan wanted to live in a lie, I would make the truth his shadow, following him everywhere, waiting until he broke under its weight. As I closed the notebook, the rain started again outside, heavy and relentless. I sat there, staring out the window, whispering to the dark. You're not done, Lily. I'll make sure he remembers you, every single day he breathes. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel powerless. I felt purpose. The following week was the quietest of my life. But beneath that quiet, something was moving, slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. I didn't tell anyone what I planned. People said, Richard, you should rest, or let time heal you. Time doesn't heal what was murdered by betrayal. It only sharpens it. I began with the insurance company. I called them pretending to be settling Lily's estate. The woman on the phone, polite but cautious, confirmed what I already suspected. Ethan had been there the very next morning after her death. He'd filed the claim before I'd even chosen her coffin. That fact hit me harder than I expected. I sat there in silence, clutching the phone as she continued. But, sir, there's been a hold on the payment. Some discrepancies were found. We'll be conducting an investigation. I smiled, a small, bitter smile. Fate had already begun helping me. My next step was Lily's workplace. She had worked as an art teacher at a small community center. When I visited, her colleagues welcomed me with compassion. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, hesitated before speaking. Mr. Whitmore, I probably shouldn't tell you this, But Lily came to work with bruises sometimes. She said she fell, but we all knew. The room spun for a moment. I gripped the edge of the table. Did she ever say anything about Ethan? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Once. She said he'd changed after the wedding. Controlling, distant. She stopped bringing her paintings. Said he didn't like them cluttering the house. That was the moment I realized my daughter's life hadn't just been taken from her by sickness. It had been drained slowly, day by day, by the man who was supposed to protect her. That night, I drove to the small cafe where Ethan used to hang out with his friends. I sat in my car across the street, watching. He came out around 10 p.m., laughing, his arm around the woman in red heels. They looked like they belonged in a commercial, perfect, soulless, and expensive. I took a photo. Then another. Then one more when he kissed her before driving away. The next morning, I visited Lily's old lawyer, a man named Patrick Sloan who'd helped her with her teaching contracts. When I mentioned Ethan's name, Patrick frowned. He tried to get me to change her will last month. Said Lily agreed, but she wasn't there to sign. I refused. It felt wrong. So it was true. Ethan had been preparing for her death even before she collapsed. Piece by piece, his mask was peeling away. I spent the following days organizing everything. Dates, names, photos, screenshots, bank transfers. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was method. And though my hands trembled with age, my mind had never been sharper. One evening, I returned to the cemetery. The rain had stopped, and the world felt unnaturally quiet. I stood before Lily's grave, brushing fallen leaves from the stone. "I'm close, sweetheart," I whispered. "He thinks he's untouchable, but soon everyone will see him for what he is." A gust of wind rustled through the trees, and for a brief second, I could almost hear her laugh again, that soft, melodic sound that used to fill my home. When I got back to my car, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. "Unknown, you should stop digging, old man." I froze. My heart pounded. Someone knew. Someone was watching. I stared into the rearview mirror, scanning the dark street. No one. Just shadows. But the message changed everything. Ethan wasn't just careless, he was aware. Instead of fear, something colder settled in my chest. If he thought threats would stop me, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I typed back. "Too late. You buried the wrong person." Then I deleted the thread and started the engine. From that moment, I decided to turn his own arrogance against him. He loved appearances, the perfect widower, the charming man with a tragic past. So I'd make that image crumble in front of everyone. Step 1. Expose the affair. Step 2. Expose the insurance fraud. Step 3. Make sure he watched his life collapse piece by piece, without ever realizing who was pulling the strings. I knew exactly how I'd start. There was a charity gala the following weekend, one Lily used to organize. Ethan had volunteered to attend in her honor. I planned to be there too, not as the grieving father, but as the quiet storm that was coming for him. And when his smile faded that night, when his lies began to burn under the light of truth, I'd be there, watching, waiting. The charity gala had been Lily's favorite event of the year. She used to plan it months in advance. Flowers, music, art displays from her students. The night was always full of warmth and laughter. I still remembered her voice echoing in my head that morning as I put on my old gray suit. "Dad, it's not about fancy people," she once said. "It's about giving back." Now, that same event was being hosted in her memory, and the man responsible for her suffering was headlining it. I arrived early, blending into the background. The hotel ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, with tables wrapped in white linen and golden lights. Waiters carried trays of champagne, while a jazz band played softly in the corner. On the far side of the room stood Ethan, the widower in his tailored black suit, shaking hands, smiling, accepting condolences like a man who'd lost everything. Except he hadn't lost his charm. Or his lies. He spotted me from across the room. His smile faltered for a moment, then returned, polished and empty. He walked over, glass in hand. "Didn't expect to see you here, Richard," he said, his tone falsely polite. "Thought you'd want to stay home, rest." "I couldn't miss Lily's night," I replied evenly. "She built this event. She deserved better than to be represented by you." He chuckled softly, sipping his drink. "Still blaming me for everything? Grief does strange things, old man." I leaned closer, my voice low. "You filed her insurance claim the morning after she died. You didn't even wait for the burial. For the first time, his eyes flickered with panic, a flash so brief most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Then he smiled again, hiding behind his mask. You've been checking up on me, huh? Careful, Richard. People might start thinking you've lost it. I let him walk away. I didn't need to argue. Not tonight. Tonight was about something else entirely, exposure. At 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. The host took the stage, speaking about Lily's dedication to education and art. Photos of her appeared on a large screen behind him. Lily laughing with her students, painting, smiling beside Ethan. Then, the host announced, in memory of his late wife, Mr. Ethan Reed has made a generous donation to the Art for Hope Foundation. Applause filled the room. Ethan stepped onto the stage, pretending to wipe a tear. Lily believed in beauty, he said dramatically, voice breaking just enough to sound sincere. I'm just doing my part to keep her dream alive. I felt my stomach twist. He was performing grief, and the audience was eating it up. When the speech ended, I quietly slipped toward the control booth at the back of the room. Earlier that day, I had visited one of the staff members who used to know Lily, an old technician named Tom, who owed her a favor. I had given him a flash drive. Now, as Ethan raised his glass for a toast, Tom gave me a discreet nod. The lights flickered once. Then, on the massive screen, a video started playing. Not the one planned for the event, a different one. The footage showed Ethan at a restaurant, laughing, kissing the woman in red heels, champagne spilling over their table. The caption from his own account appeared across the screen in bold letters. Best birthday ever. Surrounded by real love. The room went silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers began. Ethan froze, his glass halfway to his lips. His confident mask shattered in an instant. What the hell? Turn that off, he barked, but the damage was already done. The host stammered. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, I said loudly from my seat, my voice cutting through the noise. That video was taken the night Lily was fighting for her life in the hospital. Dozens of eyes turned to him. Someone whispered, "Is that true?" Another voice, "That's disgusting." Ethan's face turned pale. You're crazy, Richard. You edited that. Did I also edit your insurance claim? I interrupted. Or your messages to that woman 2 days after her funeral? The crowd buzzed louder now, phones already out, recording everything. Ethan's perfect world, the polished image he had built, was unraveling in real time. He stormed off the stage, shoving through people. I followed him out into the hallway. How dare you? He hissed, his voice trembling with rage. How dare you? I answered quietly. She loved you, and you killed her piece by piece. I promised her I wouldn't let you pretend. He glared at me, his jaw tight. You think anyone will believe an old man over me? You've got nothing. I smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. That was only the beginning. He froze for a second, then walked away, muttering curses under his breath. I stood there, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall, and for the first time since Lily's death, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not satisfaction, but the first breath of justice. Back inside, the screen was black again. The audience whispered in confusion, pity, anger. Some of Lily's old students hugged me, saying he deserved that. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I had lit the first spark. Now, I was going to watch the fire spread. The next morning, the video was everywhere. Clips from the gala spread across social media like wildfire. Ethan's fake smile, the video of him celebrating while Lily lay dying, my voice cutting through the silence. That video was taken the night Lily was fighting for her life. By noon, news blogs picked it up. Charity gala turns chaotic. Husband of deceased teacher exposed for infidelity and fraud. Ethan's name, once associated with charm and charity, now trended beside words like liar, cheater, and widower with secrets. I didn't post anything. I didn't have to. The truth was working for me now. That evening, I walked to the cafe near my house, the same one Lily loved. The waitress, a kind woman who'd known us for years, brought my coffee without me asking. I saw what you did, she said softly. You were brave. I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly. I wasn't sure if it was adrenaline or age. It wasn't bravery, I said quietly. It was a promise. When I stepped outside, rain started again. Cold, steady, cleansing. Across town, Ethan's world was burning. He was suspended from his job, a corporate PR firm that prized its family values. Sponsors withdrew from his foundation. The woman in red heels deleted her social media. His friends stopped returning calls. By the second day, I got an email from a reporter. They'd received an anonymous envelope containing the insurance documents and copies of Lily's medical records. They asked for a statement. I simply replied, "The truth speaks for itself." I hadn't planned on the media taking interest so quickly, but it helped me more than I expected. Each article painted a clearer picture. A man who profited from his wife's death, who played the grieving husband while cashing in on tragedy. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because beneath the public disgrace, Ethan was starting to fight back. On the third day, I found a note slipped under my front door. No name. Just 5 words written in a rushed, angry scrawl. "You don't know who I am." I folded it slowly, placed it in the same box where I kept Lily's photos, and whispered, "Maybe not. But you'll soon remember who I am." The next morning, I went to the insurance office in person. The woman at the desk recognized me immediately, her eyes soft with sympathy. "Mr. Whitmore, we're aware of the recent news. You'll be pleased to know the investigation into Mr. Reed's claim is underway. There's evidence of forged signatures." "Forged?" I repeated. She nodded. "It seems parts of your daughter's consent were digitally altered. If it's proven, the payout will be void, and Mr. Reed could face charges." I thanked her and left, heart pounding. Justice wasn't coming fast, but it was coming. That night, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, the voice on the other end was shaky, afraid. "Mr. Whitmore? It's me, Sarah. From Lily's work." "Yes, Sarah. What's wrong?" "I think Ethan came to my apartment," she whispered. "He knocked for a long time. When I didn't open, he left a note saying I should stay quiet about things that don't concern me. I'm scared." I clenched my fist so tightly the phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Lock your door. Call the police if he comes back." After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The old me, the quiet carpenter who spent Sundays fixing things around the house, would have left it to the law. But that man was gone. I picked up my phone and dialed another number, Patrick Sloan, Lily's lawyer. "Patrick, I need your help," I said. "I want to make a report, not just about the insurance, but about a pattern. Financial, emotional, maybe even criminal. I have proof." Patrick hesitated, then said, "I'll prepare everything. But Richard, are you ready for what comes next?" I looked at Lily's photo on the wall. I've been ready since the night he cut that cake. Over the next few days, I gathered everything, screenshots, printed texts, even recordings of Ethan's calls. Patrick helped me arrange it into a neat, devastating case file. Then, I delivered copies to 3 places: the police, the insurance investigation unit, and, quietly, to Ethan's company's board of directors. By the end of the week, he was officially under investigation for fraud and harassment. His assets were frozen. His car was repossessed. The man who once smiled for cameras now hid from reporters outside his empty home. I watched the news that night with no satisfaction, only stillness. The world was giving him back what he'd sent into it. But still, something inside me whispered that it wasn't over. He wasn't the kind to crumble quietly. And I was right. Because 3 nights later, just as I was locking up my workshop, I heard a car pull up outside. Headlights flashed across the window. Then a voice I'd come to despise. Hoarse, angry, trembling with rage. "Richard, we need to talk." I stood still, listening to the sound of his footsteps crunching the gravel. The storm wasn't over. It was just coming home. The headlights cut through the fog, spilling white light into my yard. I stayed by the window, hidden in the shadows, watching as Ethan stepped out of his car. He looked different now, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, movements uneven. The arrogance was gone. What stood before me was a man cornered by his own lies. He slammed the car door and shouted, "I know you're in there, Richard." His voice cracked somewhere between anger and desperation. "You think you can ruin me? You think you're some kind of hero?" I didn't answer. I wanted to hear how far he'd go. He walked up the porch steps, fists clenched. Rain had started again, thin, cold lines that shimmered under the porch light. "You don't know what you've done," he yelled. "You've destroyed everything I built." I opened the door slowly, meeting his wild eyes. "You mean everything she built?" I said quietly. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. But instead, he laughed, a low, bitter sound. "You're insane. You think you're righteous, don't you? Lily was sick, paranoid. She made you believe I was the villain. But you were never there, were you? You didn't see how she really was. That sentence, that lie, hit harder than any punch could. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back the rage clawing inside me. You dare speak about her like that? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. You've been digging into things you don't understand. Those emails, those documents, you twisted them. I loved her. I let the silence stretch between us until it became unbearable. You loved her so much you left her to die alone, I said. You loved her so much you cashed her death into a payday. He flinched. I didn't mean for her to. He stopped himself, realizing he'd said too much. Didn't mean for her to what? I asked. My voice was steady now, almost calm. To collapse? To stop breathing? Or just to stop existing conveniently enough for you to collect? He turned away, wiping his face, muttering curses. You've ruined my life, old man. You did that yourself, I replied. I just turned the lights on. He spun around suddenly, shouting, You think anyone cares about your crusade? They'll forget. They always do. I stepped closer until we were face to face, the rain running down both our coats. Then I'll remind them, I said. Every day, every time your name shows up, they'll remember the man who laughed while his wife died. He stared at me, really stared, and for the first time, I saw fear. Not of me, but of himself. His voice dropped to a whisper. You have no idea what you've started. I smiled faintly. Oh, Ethan, I started nothing. You did. For a long second, we just stood there, two men on opposite sides of a grave, separated by the choices one of them made and the pain the other refused to forget. Then he stepped back, eyes narrowing. This isn't over. It never is, I said softly. He turned, storming off into the rain. Tires screeched as his car disappeared down the road, leaving nothing but silence and the faint echo of his rage. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. It was relief, the first breath after years of holding it in. But when I turned toward the living room, I noticed something on the table. An envelope. He must have dropped it there when I wasn't looking. Inside was a single photo, Lily and Ethan, taken on their wedding day. Her smile radiant, his eyes cold even then. On the back, a few words scrawled in black marker. You don't know the whole story. I stood there for a long time, staring at those words. They weren't a threat this time. They were a warning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me look toward the window. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps. By morning, I called Patrick, my lawyer. He came here, I said. He's slipping. He's desperate. But something tells me there's more he's hiding. Patrick sighed. I'll see what I can dig up. But Richard, be careful. Desperate men do desperate things. I hung up and sat by Lily's photo on the shelf. He says I don't know the whole story, I whispered. Then I'll find out. All of it. I didn't realize then how right Ethan was. There was more to the story. Something Lily had kept from both of us. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about the night she died. But that revelation was still waiting in the shadows. For now, I poured myself a cup of cold coffee, stared out the rain-streaked window, and whispered into the empty house. This isn't over yet, sweetheart. Not until the truth is all that's left. The morning after Ethan's visit, the world felt heavier, like the air itself was made of secrets. I couldn't shake his final words from my mind. You don't know the whole story. They repeated like an echo in the silence of my home. What could I not know? I had seen the documents, the lies, the betrayal. What else could there possibly be? I turned to the box again, the same old box where I'd kept all of Lily's belongings from the hospital. Her phone, her wedding ring, her sketchbook, and that faded laptop. I'd gone through it before, but grief makes a man blind. Maybe I missed something. I booted up the laptop, waiting for the slow hum of life to fill the room. When the screen lit, I began opening folders one by one, documents, photos, letters. Nothing new. Then I saw a small folder I'd never noticed before. It was buried deep inside her desktop, hidden behind layers of teaching materials. Its name was simple, Voices. My chest tightened. Inside were 4 audio files, all dated within the final week of her life. My hand hovered over the mouse for a long time before I pressed play. At first, all I heard was static. Then her voice, soft, trembling, painfully familiar. It's 11:47 p.m. I can't sleep again. Ethan's still out. He said he's working, but I know that's not true. He's been gone every night this week. My throat went dry. I don't know what's happening to me. My chest hurts every time we fight. He says I'm overreacting, but I can feel something wrong inside. Maybe it's my heart, maybe it's him. I paused the recording, unable to breathe. Then, after a few seconds, I pressed play again. He said something tonight, something that scared me. He said, "If you keep pushing me, you'll regret it." And then he smiled. Not like he was joking, like he meant it. The next recording began only a day later. Her voice was weaker. "He made me tea tonight. Said it would help me sleep. It tasted strange, bitter. I only had a few sips, and my chest started hurting again. He told me I was imagining it. But I'm not crazy. I know my body. I know when something's wrong." I stopped the playback, hands trembling so badly I could barely keep them steady. The tea. Bitter. Pain. He had been drugging her, slowly, quietly, over time. The third file was shorter, but the most haunting. "If something happens to me, Dad, check the kitchen cabinet, top shelf. There's a bottle there. It's not medicine. It's what he's been giving me. I just want you to know that I love you. I'm sorry." The sound of her crying filled the room. Quiet, restrained, like she was afraid even her tears might wake him. Then the recording ended. The fourth file was blank. Just silence. 30 seconds of silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. My hands went numb. The house around me felt smaller, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Then I stood up and drove straight to Lily's old home. The police had cleared it after her death, but Ethan's key under the flower pot still worked. The house smelled the same. Faint vanilla from her candles, the ghost of her perfume. I went straight to the kitchen, my heart pounding. I reached up to the top shelf she'd mentioned. And there it was. A small glass bottle, half empty, label peeled off. I unscrewed it and sniffed. The smell was chemical, sharp, bitter, like crushed pills in water. I didn't need a lab to tell me this wasn't tea. I placed it carefully in a plastic bag, then sat at her old table. My body was shaking. Not from shock this time, from something else. From the feeling of truth sliding into place like the last cruel piece of a puzzle. He hadn't just watched her die. He'd helped her die. I drove to the police station without thinking. When I handed them the bag, the officer's expression changed from sympathy to quiet concern. "We'll send it to forensics," he said. "You did the right thing." For the first time in months, I felt the faintest weight lift off my chest. Not relief, not yet, but something like clarity. That night, as rain tapped on the roof, I played the recordings one last time. I needed to hear her voice again, to remind myself what this fight was for. When the last one ended, I whispered to the dark, "I found it, Lily. I found the truth." But in the back of my mind, I could still hear Ethan's voice. "You don't know the whole story." And maybe he was right again, because sometimes truth isn't just one side of a blade. Sometimes it cuts both ways. The next morning, I got a call from the detective in charge. "Mr. Whitmore," he said gravely, "we tested the substance in the bottle. You were right, it's toxic. But we also found traces of it in your daughter's blood." My breath caught. So he poisoned her? A long pause. Maybe. Or maybe she knew and drank it herself. We can't rule out that she took it willingly. There's something else. We found her fingerprints on the bottle. Only hers. The floor seemed to vanish beneath me. I dropped the phone. For the first time since her death, I didn't know what to believe. For 2 days, I couldn't move. The house felt colder, emptier, as if Lily's ghost had finally stopped visiting. The detective's words kept echoing in my head. Her fingerprints were the only ones on the bottle. Could she have? No, not my Lily. She fought for life until the end. She promised me she'd never give up. Yet the thought wormed its way into my mind, poisoning every memory. On the third morning, I forced myself to go back to the station. I needed answers. Detective Harris, a quiet man with gray stubble and kind eyes, greeted me with a nod. "Mr. Whitmore, please sit. We've gone through the recordings and digital evidence." He pressed play on a recording I hadn't heard before. A voicemail Ethan had left on Lily's phone 3 days before she died. "Lily, I'm done talking. You either stop these accusations, or I walk. I'm tired of being painted as a monster. If you think you're sick, get help. I'm not your doctor." He hung up. The tone was harsh, but not murderous. I frowned. "That doesn't clear him," I said. "No, it doesn't," the detective replied. But it complicates things. Forensics found traces of multiple medications in her system, antidepressants, sedatives, and heart stabilizers, all legally prescribed. So, the substance in that bottle, the toxin, was mixed with one of her own prescriptions. We believe she may have accidentally combined them. Or he hesitated. Or she may have done it intentionally, after months of stress and medication imbalance. The room started spinning. You're saying my daughter? We don't know, he interrupted softly. But we know this. Ethan Reed didn't mix the poison. There's no physical proof he handled it. He's guilty of emotional abuse, neglect, and fraud, but not murder. I gripped the edge of the table. He pushed her there. Maybe he didn't pour the poison, but he gave her the reason to drink it. Harris nodded slowly. That, I believe. When I left the station, the sky was gray, the kind of sky that swallows light. I drove aimlessly for hours, through the streets where she'd grown up, past the park where she used to paint, by the coffee shop where she'd first met Ethan. Everything felt different now, tarnished. I stopped at the cemetery. Her name glistened on the wet marble. Lily Whitmore Reed, 1994 to 2024. Loved beyond words. I sat beside her grave for a long time. They say it was an accident, I whispered. But I know better. He may not have killed you with his hands, but he broke you all the same. The wind stirred the grass, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice again, soft, forgiving. That night, I went home and turned on the TV. Ethan's face filled the screen. He was leaving the courthouse, cameras flashing. Reporters shouted questions. His lawyer pushed him toward a car. The headline read, Ethan Reed indicted for fraud, emotional abuse, and obstruction of investigation. He looked smaller now, pale, sweating, empty. When one reporter yelled, What do you have to say about your wife's death? He muttered, She was sick, and ducked into the car. That was the last time I saw him. He fled the city shortly after. The case dragged for months, and eventually he took a plea deal for insurance fraud and falsifying documents. 3 years in prison. No murder charge. Justice, but not enough. Never enough. Months passed. Seasons shifted. I started rebuilding the small workshop behind my house, the one Lily used to paint in. I sanded the old wood, repaired the windows, and hung one of her unfinished canvases on the wall. It was a simple painting, a field of yellow flowers under a gray sky. Half the petals were missing. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the dusty glass, I found something tucked behind the frame. A letter. Her handwriting, elegant, familiar. My heart stopped. Dad, if you ever find this, it means I didn't make it. Please don't let hate eat you alive. I know you want to protect me, but promise me you'll still live. Don't become him. Cold, angry, small. Remember the garden. Remember the sea. Remember that I loved you more than anything. Love, Lily. By the time I finished reading, the paper was wet with tears I hadn't felt coming. I went outside and stood under the fading sun. For the first time since she died, I breathed, really breathed. The air smelled of rain and pine and something like forgiveness. That night, I lit a single candle by her photo. I kept my promise, I whispered. He can't pretend anymore. Everyone knows what he did. But now I'll try to live like you wanted me to. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of lilies. Maybe it was just the breeze. Maybe it was her, finally at peace. Either way, I smiled, the first true smile in a long, long time. And in that quiet room, surrounded by her art and memories, I finally understood what revenge really meant. It wasn't about destruction. It was about truth and the strength to live after it.